our first event of CIC India Ignite ThinkGrid 2020 finale. As you all know, this year Ignite ThinkGrid has gone virtual and we have had an astounding participation so far. So there were around 200 plus assets submitted from India. We had 70 plus poster submissions and around 50 blogs were submitted. So thank you everyone for your enthusiastic participation. It's been a really great journey so far. Now, the hunt to identify the best of Ignite is really heating up. So here's what we'll do in today's event. It'll be distributed, separated into two parts. We will start the event by an address from GIC Ignite practice leader Sandeep Mohapatra. That will be followed by a keynote address by the FSS sector lead Amit Ranade. We have a client speak next from NBS account client Richard Jordan. We will wrap up the first part of our event with a fun-filled quiz. In part 2 of the session, we will have the best brains of FSS sector showcase their assets to our esteemed judges. I hand over the floor to Sandeep now to formally kickstart the event. Over to you, Sandeep.
Thanks, Devashri. So, morning, good afternoon, evening. Thanks a lot for joining. Really appreciate all of you joining today, especially Amit and Rich. Thanks for your time. Really looking forward to your sessions. Also to all the presenters, all the best. This is a celebration of all the great work that you have been doing. And right, a good opportunity for all of you to showcase what all you have done in your accounts to the rest of the practice. Couple of things that I would just kind of like to highlight. One is keep an open mind, right? So apart from just celebrating the good stories that we have done in the accounts, this is a great opportunity for the rest of us to really learn from them. So keep an open mind. Don't think of why this idea will not work for my client. Think of how you can take that idea and make it work for your client. Given the current situation, the challenges that our client facing, there is a lot of expectation from our clients, from us, and a lot of these ideas I feel are opportunity for us to tailor it and take it to our clients. So keep an open mind and think of how you can take these ideas for your own specific clients and help them solve their problems. Second is build on ideas. Now, if you look at all the best ideas that have always been there, they have never been kind of a single person coming up with the idea. It's always some idea, then somebody builds on that idea, somebody thinks of it differently in a different context and tries to do something differently. So we need as a practice to continuously build on ideas, and therefore we will definitely have something great. So keep an open mind and build on ideas. So lastly, before I hand over to Amit, who is the CIC India FSS sector leader, and then we'll address this the whole team. Before I do that, I would like to say a couple of things. One is, again, thanks for all the good delivery work that all of you have been doing across our industries and across geographies in the last few months specifically, which have been quite tough. And then secondly, keep safe. I hope you and your families are keeping safe, and please continue to take all precautions. So with that, thanks everybody for joining again, and I would request now Amit to kind of address this gathering. Amit, yeah, if you are there, thank you.
Hi Sandeep, thanks for the invitation as well as, can you guys hear me? That's my first question.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Awesome, right? Well, I am having serious internet challenges right now, and that's why I was a bit late. And now I was connecting with two devices, but now I'm fine, I guess, right? But I'm not going to take the risk of switching on my video right now. I will just ensure that I stay on this line at least, right? So first of all, thanks for your invitation, right? That definitely helps because you feel good when somebody invites you and sort of asks you to give some, you can say, experience sharing, and you can say snippets which the team can benefit from, right? So I won't take long, right? I guess, Sandeep, I've got 5 minutes, right, to introduce and the topic as well as share my experience.
You can take, sir, 5-10 minutes also, no problem, sir.
Okay, no problem. All right. So first of all, we the participants on the call. Thank you very much, right, for taking the time out. Number one, to join this, because these are sessions which essentially help all of us get to know each other, especially in these times when we don't see each other, right? At the same time, it's also good to understand what's going on with your next door neighbor, who now is not your next door neighbor because you and he or she are not in the office, right? But I can sort of give you a view of where is QA heading, right? What do I see in my sector, right? And I've been a techie all along, right? I happen to be in my role, right? In terms of running the sector today, but at heart, I'm still a tester, a developer, right? I still like it when my kid asks me a question on Java development or Python, because I still seem to know more than what he does, right? Maybe a couple of years more, and then I don't think I'll know more than him. But let's look at QA, right? Because this is a QA session. First of all, if we don't do a sound job on QA, I don't think we're going to get any repeat business, right? You are, in my view, you stand between my renewal and the development team, right? Because if you guys don't essentially do a fine job, I don't think we will get any repeat business. And the reason I'm saying that is because we went through a troubled situation, and we still are, in my opinion, on a troubled account right now, where we did 2 releases, right? And both releases were, the first release was flawless, no defect in production. Second was a critical defect, which took about, say, a day to resolve, but otherwise, R1, R2, it's fantastic, right? And that's what's essentially kept us going on this account, although it's extremely troubled, right? But what I'm trying to get to is it's an extremely important role in a software development lifecycle, right? And while a developer may undermine a tester's presence, and a tester may undermine a developer's presence, right? In my view, whether it's an architect, a developer, a tester, or a manager, right? There is a role to play, right? And every role is important, because a developer can programming, but if the developer cannot follow standards, cannot actually program to a spec, the tester is going to actually call it out, right? Similarly, a tester can, in my opinion, pass on a defect into production, causing somebody a $1 million, you can say, impact, which then you never know may come and bite you back as the tester, right? An architect, essentially, if the system does not perform well, is the architect to blame, right? And if it's the manager, essentially, who's first of all driving your career, more than driving your career, driving your project, right, in terms of costs and everything. So there is a role to play. And I didn't want to digress away from the tester, but the thing which I wanted to bring out was that there is sometimes less importance given to a tester QA role, right, which I don't appreciate. And that's why I said you stand between my renewal and the development team. That's number one, right? Number two, if we strive towards a zero defect organization, right? And Sandeep will recall 2012 when he and I were working on TD Bank, right? Trying to get our VP to get into a zero defects organization, right? We succeeded, right? And we got repeat business as well. In fact, she actually presented Sandeep and my tech story to our leadership when she was visiting, right? So essentially, why I'm calling that out is because a zero defect organization is something we should strive for, right? And if we can get to it, I don't think we'll get to it every time on a project, but that's something which we should look forward to, right? That's number one. Number two, in terms of efficiencies, right? I don't need to tell you when I'm talking to the Ignite team that you guys are what we call pioneers of driving testing efficiency, right? But essentially, the smart thing to do is, do you really need to test everything, right? I don't think so, right? As long as you can test most of it, and then get into a negotiation with your client saying, I can do, we are through the happy parts, we have no Sev 1, Sev 2s, let's push it to prod, right? Because that helps you get user feedback, which is extremely critical, right? The third thing, the most important thing is, as I'm saying, because I run the banking and the financial services clients and the insurance companies, there is a wee bit of domain knowledge that is going to help you go deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And so let's look at banking application, right? And then you're testing an overdraft workflow. And if you understand overdraft, essentially, the bank allows you to use some money based on some collateral kept into the bank, right? Or because of a credit history. But the first thing you would actually do is you would check for the overdraft flag to be yes or no, right? Before you actually test the function. And that comes from domain, right? And then you go to domain, and then you go deeper and deeper, and then you say, I am a banker, right? And I am no more a tester, which is fine, right? That is how your career is going to progress. But essentially, domain plays an important role. I don't know whether you were on the Pune session last week for the Career Carnival, right? And then we actually had Usha talk about how the industry helps shape your consulting career, be it an architect, be it a tester, be it a developer, right? So my view, guys, hang on to the Ignite forum, because it is a platform which is a differentiator, number one. Number two, strive for a zero defect organization. You will succeed, right? And the third one is my view. If we can actually go deeper on domain, it will only help our product in terms of that being flawless when it goes out there, being resilient, and then we getting repeat business, because that's all we actually have to look at, right? Growth and repeat business. Thank you once again for inviting me. Sandeep, back to you.
Thanks, Amit. Devashri, over to you.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Sandeep. Amit, thank you very much for reiterating us the power QAs have and the importance of domain knowledge. That's really important. So moving on, as all of you know, ThinkGrid is not limited to India. It is a global IBM event. And across the globe, we had around 270 asset submissions, 80 poster, and 61 blog submissions. So big kudos to all the innovative, passionate, and enthusiastic IBM brains. Today, in our midst, we have a very enthusiastic and technical person. He is Richard Jordan from Nationwide Building Society. Rich is the test engineering manager at Nationwide. He comes from a more technical testing background and has been involved in many initiatives around automation. He has set up teams, frameworks, and in more recent times, he has been working on strategies for transforming test teams to be DevOps ready. Rich has spoken at a number of testing and DevOps conferences as well, and he has been sharing experiences about what he and his team have learned along the way, what works in testing and what doesn't. And most recently, he spoke at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, wherein he presented a presentation entitled, Your Shift Left Initiatives Are Failing. Here's How to Fix Them. Welcome, Rich, to Ignite ThinkGrid 2020. Hope you're enjoying the event. We look forward to hearing from your presentation. Over to you, Rich.
Thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me along. What I wanted to share today is really the story of Nationwide's journey. And I think what's great about being able to do this presentation is I already know there's quite a lot of people on the call that have been involved in this story and probably can answer a lot of the questions that the rest of the audience have got around how or why we did some of these things, which is a really cool thing to present back. So the title of this is Automation and Your Shift Left Initiatives Are Missing the Point of Testing. And really, I think what I wanted to get over is there's a lot of buzzwords in the testing industry today and in IT in general around DevOps and Agile and test automation and shift left. And really, there's a lot of buzzwords. And really, what I wanted to talk about is our journey in terms of understanding what works for us, what doesn't work for us, to where we've got today, where I'm going to suggest that we have a high-performing capability where it comes to QA and testing. Okay, so a bit about Nationwide. Appreciate many people won't know who or what we are. So we're a UK financial services organisation. There's a few stats there around what we've done in 2019. So quite a few prod changes, as you can see. We've gone on a transition, so we are, just like every other organization in the world probably, we are going from a project-centric to a product-centric organization, so very much in line with agile ways of working. we currently have around 130 initiatives going at any point in time in terms of IT change, and they are centered around what we call squads. So you'll be familiar with squads in other organizations, are very similar to the way that we will align. So as a financial services organization, we will have squads around things like current accounts or things around core banking. You know, we're a financial services organization. You get the idea about how we align our squads. I guess from a technology perspective, and I think, you know, a lot of the kind of the buzzwords, a lot of the stories are centered around kind of greenfield, newer technologies. I think what's true for certainly Nationwide and financial services organizations the world over is we don't just have greenfield technology estates. Nationwide has come from a 20, 30, 40-year journey of IT, and therefore we have a spider's web, if you like, of technologies, both old and new, including mainframe from the 90s right up to current day newer technologies around things like event-driven architectures, Kafka, MongoDB. You get the idea. We have a lot of technology, a lot of variation in what we do. Okay, so that's a bit about Nationwide. And what I wanted to start to do is get into a bit of the kind of the guts around the purpose of the presentation. So what we hear, and I assume many people, if not everybody on this call, will be very familiar with shift left as a transformation buzzword. And what you'll start to recognize is the bullet points that I've started to put on this slide. And if we're honest, we've probably done them many times, and many times they haven't quite given us the kind of the sales pitch that it promised to give us. Things around shift left, getting testers into early meetings, they didn't really have the outcome that we really wanted. They weren't really pitched in the right way. Things around changing tool sets, so we'll all be familiar with things like Cucumber or things like Selenium, newer tool sets replacing older tool sets. Really what I wanted to do in terms of this presentation is concentrate on the last three. Okay, so a massive move towards BDD as a development methodology within Agile, and the misconception of what BDD is. Talk about how to change your culture. And everybody is trying to change their culture to a DevOps or an Agile culture, but is that really what we want to change our culture to? And then, as the title of the presentation talks about, everybody is so concentrated on automation, it sometimes distracts or detracts away from what we are trying to do in test, which is assess the quality of the products that IT is trying to knock out. Okay, so testing is slow. Yeah, that's what we're told. We're always the bottleneck. And is that really true? Is it really the point? And what I've got on here is a couple of suggestions from quite prominent people from the testing industry. First one being a chap called Michael Bolton, who was involved in many pieces of work around testing initiatives, testing thought leadership. And what he starts to talk about really, and if you take software engineering as an engineering discipline and you compare that to other engineering disciplines, he starts to talk about the fact that we kind of rush into doing code. And it suggests that we start building things without really understanding what we are trying to build. And that's certainly true of my experience, and it's certainly true of many others that I talk to as well, in terms of not really understanding what we are trying to build before we're actually building it. Okay, and that's a real problem for test, because what are we trying to test? Okay, another person who's quite prominent in the testing industry is a chap called Richard Bradshaw, and he talks about, it's quite aptly named, the FART model. So that's the flawed approach to regression testing. Okay, so what that talks to really is the stakeholder saying, oh, we aren't making any change, just run the regression back from last time. Okay, but that's a flawed way of understanding quality, because first and foremost, we can't understand everything about a system, and therefore we can't ever guarantee that we're never going to find a defect. Okay, so we as a tester or as a QA function, we're continuing exploring what good looks like, what the quality bar is. We're trying to get a consistent understanding between test and stakeholders, product owners, if you like, around what does quality really mean to us. And as IT is changing, that system is changing. We need to constantly reevaluate what quality means to us. Okay, so really a lot of focus on testing or the act of testing, but really, is that fair? Okay, so what we kind of do in Nationwide, and what we try and really shout about quite loudly is going back to basics in terms of what testing is, or really what quality is. So we will have all done things like ISTQB qualifications around testing. One of the first things they would have taught us was around verification and validation. Okay, so validation, Nationwide certainly do a lot of validation. Yeah, lots and lots of testing, and lots and lots of outcomes of test execution. But the reality is we don't do enough verification, right? We seem to accept the fact that requirements won't be quite as smart as they should be. There might be gaps in documentation. There might be gaps in specifications. Is that really good enough in the kind of the pursuit of DevOps and continuous delivery? It's going to create a lot of problems and a lot of bottlenecks when we really try and do things in a repeated and repetitive manner. Okay. So what we do in Nationwide is we've started to adopt a bit of a BDD approach to our development. Okay, so a lot of organizations or a lot of consultancies will pitch BDD as a test automation activity. That's wrong. Okay, it's not cucumber and it's not gherkin syntax. It's all about collaboration. Okay, so this is a diagram that is our manifesto within the test COE of Nationwide. Okay, and it describes how we want testers to interact with the agile teams or the project teams that they work within. Okay, so if we quickly whisk around, what we've got in number one is illustration. So what we've talked about there is the three amigos in an agile world, talking about what does quality really mean to us? What do we want the product to do that we are developing? Okay, so the three amigos being the product owner, the developer, and the tester. Okay, so that's a conversation, that's a collaboration. And what we do in Nationwide is we start to use modeling tools. So we create a visual representation of what we want that IT solution to look like, to build up a common understanding of what good looks like. Okay, now we work in a financial services organization. I already mentioned that we have some quite old systems, and therefore naturally we will have technical debt. And therefore we need an acceptance that we don't really understand everything about the systems or the interfaces that our IT change needs to go through. Okay, and that's a key piece of the collaboration that the three amigos need to go through, because historically that piece of technical debt or that lack of understanding would have been thrown into test. Okay, and that's a big problem, because what we don't have is repeatability, we don't have predictability, and therefore we fail when it comes to automation. Okay, if we do those things, if we have those conversations, we both understand what quality means, which is really positive, but we also have repeatable, predictable outcomes. And therefore, that's the bedrock of test automation. Okay, so we've got test automation, we run that in our CI/CD pipeline. And because we are doing these things effectively, we need to celebrate where we're doing these things so we can promote that use even further. Okay, so brilliant. Let's all collaborate. But the problem is collaboration is just a word. What does it actually mean? It's a bit like shift left. Let's get testers into a meeting early. Yeah, just because you attend a meeting, that doesn't mean there is a valuable participation in that meeting. That doesn't mean that necessarily the outcome is going to be testable when it comes to building the product. So we need to look at it from a number of lenses. It's not just about collaboration. Okay, and one of the problems is the way that systems have been developed in the past. Okay, so what you'll find is a lot of specifications talk about business flows, okay, which is valid, but the problem with the business flow, when it converts into the IT stack or the topology of the IT estate, is that, to be honest, it's a bit of a mess, yeah, and the diagram here hopefully is a good representation of many architectures that you will see within your organizations, and the fact that we seem to spend a long time understanding business flows, but the kind of the finesse of the back end, how that IT system fits together with other IT systems, is a bit haphazard. It's a bit hapdash. Okay, so there's a problem, and it's a problem with the way that we've done testing historically in the industry. And what we talk about in Nationwide is going from ice creams to volcanoes. And probably people from Nationwide are smiling when I've got this slide. This is the well-known slide within the organization. We do lots and lots of manual tests within Nationwide, and lots and lots of tests on the GUI, so the UI, okay? Because we understand business flows and IT systems from the GUI, okay? But that's a problem when we are trying to do agile and DevOps approaches, because they're very slow, okay? The is the hardest place to do automation, to get stability out of automation, and it creates the biggest burden in terms of infrastructure and end-to-end environments, okay? And when we find a defect, we only really understand the system from the user's concept, which is fine from a user perspective, but the reality is that we need to get right into the depths of what the IT stack is doing. We need to open up the white box of the IT system, okay? So what we do is we shift into volcanoes. So we're going from ice creams to volcanoes. So we are shifting left in what we do. We are engaging in design, and we want the designers, the developers, and the testers to have a technical conversation around APIs when we're talking about interfaces. So yes, we want to understand business flows and the business interactions, but we also need to understand API flows and data flows, which follow those same paths, okay? So the big key in this, and how do we change that conversation, is we start doing that through model-based testing or model-based design, yeah? So on that BDD representation I showed you, that again, that asset, that model that we are creating is the visual representation of the business flow or that technical conversation about how the API works, for example, okay? Okay, so we're all going to go for API testing, okay? But again, that's far too simple, okay? Because the problem with just modeling out an API is that it's a conversation between the left and the right-hand side, and if that doesn't happen, it all looks a bit clunky, yeah, as this picture hopefully tells you. So what we're really talking about is really breaking down the topology of the IT estate into the constituent parts, okay? So what you start to then see is an enterprise approach to test types, okay? So we're not talking about test phases anymore, so system test, system integration test. What we're really talking about is test types, and how do I attack the type of quality questions I want to be asking at the various levels of the IT estate that I work at. So if I work on a mobile banking application, for example, I might be interested in the UI and the look and feel, okay? I'm not so interested in the data flows because that isn't my domain, okay? Now, if I've got good architecture and if I model out, if I engineer out, and the key word there being engineering, the splits in the topology of both my IT estate but also my test approach, I can start to decouple myself away from the problems or the questions that you might ask around the database, for example, if I am working on the mobile application. Now, what does that help, or how does that help me? As well as being nimble, it also helps us to ask and delve far deeper into what it means to do good user experience, yeah? Or, you know, what you'll see on this diagram is what we've started to do is we started to branch out into other areas of testing. So you'll see infrastructure as a test type. So things around what does the platform that this application needs to sit on, and what does that look like? What does good look like? Okay. Now, what we're still going to do is we're still going to string those things together. So we're still going to do end-to-end acceptance, but the key here being that it's acceptance, okay? Through our continuous delivery and through our CI pipelines, what we are doing is we are doing lots and lots and lots of testing as the continual builds are iterated through the development lifecycle to make sure that any defects are weeded out before we ever get to those end-to-end environments and those end-to-end acceptance tests, okay? Now, how does that help? This is a real example of what we've done nationwide. I talked about the event-driven architecture that we've got. So what we start to do is we start to understand impact of change in a far greater depth. So, and the quality conversation becomes far richer. So you can see from here, what we've done is a function point analysis using modeling of our topology of the architecture of what is our event-driven architecture. So you can see, without knowing anything about Nationwide, where complexity sits in the solution that we've got here. And I think as well as understanding that and understanding function point analysis and understanding impact of change, we also start to look at and apply things like pairwise testing, all decision gates, for example. So to the point I think Amit made around not needing to test everything, what we start to do is we apply an event-driven, not an event-driven architecture, sorry, a risk-based approach based on scientific models to essentially refactor our test pack to keep ourselves nimble and to keep ourselves agile. Yeah, so we're not just talking about refactoring code, which is very important in our agile world, but we're also talking about refactoring our test assets. Okay, now inevitably change happens. Okay, so we need to make sure that we can stay on top of change. Oops, sorry. And straight away, we are making the tooling do something for us. So we can see here where impact of change happened when we did an iteration of what is a use case journey for us in terms of change customer detail. So again, without knowing anything about Nationwide or anything about the solution, you can see where change happened and where we might need to concentrate our testing. Okay, now that's really powerful, not from a testing perspective, but we want to change the conversation from a testing conversation to a quality conversation. So if you imagine my three amigos conversation very early on are able to talk about impact of change and risk of change and areas of change through theoretical models of our solution, rather than kind of what we might do today, which is jump into an end-to-end environment because we really don't know what that solution is supposed to be doing. Okay, I hope this resonates with a few people. I talked about modeling. We use a specific capability. What this is a very quick representation of it. We model right the way up the stack. This is a Red Hat Linux representation build, I should say, represented as a model for us. So Red Hat Linux 7, CIS version 2.2.0. If you're familiar with the CIS benchmark, you know exactly what that is. Essentially, when we build a Red Hat Linux server, we want to make sure that we are testing to a consistent quality every single time we do it. So we've got a bit of a conveyor belt, and this is the quality mark by which that server needs to go through. Now, this is a point in time. Again, the CIS benchmark iterates time and time again. We continually reevaluate what quality means to us, and we continually understand where we are weak or where we need to strengthen in terms of our understanding of quality and therefore our understanding or targeting of testing. Okay, now, I mentioned automation is missing the point, sorry. It's missing the point, in my opinion, but it's an outcome that inevitably our stakeholders need and we need in order to achieve continuous delivery through continuous testing. You know, without continuous automation, continuous testing is not possible. Without continuous modeling, continuous automation is not possible. So when we've implemented the levers that I've talked about today, and this is the example of one particular squad that have implemented those levers, we started to do a proof of concept of those particular levers in late 2018. In 2019, we understood that that absolutely worked, and we applied it across the piece. Okay, and you can see that from a test execution point of view, our numbers have rocketed in terms of our execution of automation in that particular squad. Okay, so for years on end, we were kind of struggling and failing in terms of doing automation because we didn't necessarily have the right building blocks in place. We recognized that, we got that right, and what do you know, we're excelling in terms of our execution in terms of testing now. So I think from on a regular basis, the squad, and again, a number of people are on the call who hopefully recognize this picture, we consistently knock out 90% plus in terms of modeling and automation and execution and everything that we do, which is a massive, massive achievement above where we were kind of in 2017 into 2018, when we were really struggling to get automation working. Okay, so as a leaving kind of gift, if you like, our advice is almost don't take the buzzwords of shift left. Yeah, it's all about learning what your solution is supposed to be doing, and that insight can come from anywhere. Okay, and we need to make sure that we bank that learning so we can reuse it in a repeatable and predictable manner, because that's really how we push the bar up on quality, how we understand quality, and that's not understanding from just a test point of view, but everybody is the bearer of quality, and absolutely quality is everybody's responsibility. So I hope that found that useful. I should say there are many people on this call who have done this for me, and I think if you're interested in what we've done, probably the best way to do that is those people who are working at Nationwide to make themselves visible in terms of what they've done so they can share that knowledge. Right, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Rich. That was a really interesting session, and more so, it was a very thought-provoking session. So thank you very much for that. And I'm sure our audience might be having some questions for you, Rich. So I'll open the floor up to the audience. If you have any questions for Rich, please put it on the chat window on WebEx. All right, I think there is one that is coming in. So, Rich, the first question that we have for you is, just give me a minute. I'm getting the question out from. All right, here we go. The question is, there are many tools and many frameworks for each tools, right? So we've got a BDD-based framework versus a data-driven framework. There are multiple automation tools. So how do we choose the right framework? What should be the levels for choosing the right framework? And the other, kind of an addendum to that question is that, one framework could have there could be one framework which is technically brilliant, whereas there could be the other aspect, which is the reporting mechanism, which can be very great. So how do we kind of make a choice, keeping the both in mind? So over to you, Rich.
So thanks for the question, Mahesh. I hope the birds are tweeting in Mumbai. I know Mahesh, by the way. So I think the key really is there is no one size fits all. And we need to be conscious about what solution we are picking to fit the job we are trying to achieve. Yeah. So for example, are we trying to build out fully fledged automation capabilities of doing regression packs of very complicated systems, or actually, and in that respect, I would suggest it's not necessarily much about the technology. It becomes more about the framework approach, and ultimately it comes down to me, why would you not be picking a hybrid framework? Yeah, so keyword driven into data driven frameworks to give you the most flexibility you can, and then it comes down to can I break down the functionality of the system under test, so I can automate that into reusable assets to reuse within my framework. That's one extreme. If I am just, for example, automating a simple data entry form, why bother with all of that? Yeah, you're kind of in the realms of, do I even create a framework, or am I kind of am I just going to create a quick harness so I can whip through and create data on the fly? Am I going to run it from a spreadsheet? Am I going to create a regular expression? What you're trying to do becomes paramount in terms of your solution you want to pick. To touch on the reporting perspective, in my opinion, you need to collect metric on absolutely everything you do, because that's the key for continuous improvement. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that's really the key mantra that I look to work into the teams that we kind of work with, to make sure that our kind of a culture is one of a lean mentality.
All right. Thanks, Rich. There's one more question, and I think we'll keep this as the last question because we are running out of time slightly. So this question is regarding the inverse pyramid automation versus ice cream model that you showed us. So the question is, how did it impact cost versus quality? Was the initial cost quite high as opposed to the general automation we leverage?
So I think it's an interesting one, because historically we've always said you need to, in terms of the pyramid of cost, quality, and speed, there's always a trade-off, right? But we've not actually found that. One of the big questions that we start to talk to is around adopting modeling to understand how things like APIs work, all right? And the perception is that this will be slower. Okay, but in our experience, we've not found that it's ever slower. In fact, it's a lot quicker. It speeds us up. It frees us from doing a lot of the mundane tasks to actually provide us more time to do exploration. Okay, now in that example that I showed you, the example of the graph where the numbers shot up, the output, which I guess you could take as speed. In fact, our numbers of test execution, as you saw them, they rocketed whilst our team size shrank by about a third. Okay, so we found that actually applying the inverse pyramid, we didn't find that trade-off. Okay, and I think what we probably did is we used that test design time rather than kind of writing it as historically lots of people will have written kind of ALM scripts in the past, which kind of are rubbish instructions around how to follow business flows. We had much richer conversations about how the solution should work and how to get predictability so we can turn out automation far quicker. So it was a lot about repurposing, I would suggest, wasted effort in the past.
Thanks, Rich, and I guess Meenakshi is thanking you as well on the chat window. That was a great question, Meenakshi, and the response was really insightful. So thank you so much, Rich, for your session. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And I can't stress enough, there are lots of people on this call that are from Nationwide who know all this stuff as well. So keep the conversation going.
Absolutely, we will. Thank you so much for joining today's session, Rich. We are really... All right, then. So, folks on the call, I think we are running a little late today. So what we are going to do is, for today's event, we are going to skip the quiz, and we'll move on to the second part of our session. I know most of you are eagerly waiting for that because it really is all about you. It is about you sharing your assets, demonstrating them to our esteemed judges. So, as you all know, we have actually 3 WebEx rooms. So, WebEx room 1, which is this room, will continue to host the idea assets. WebEx room 2 is going to be about the code assets, and WebEx room 3 about the knowledge assets. So, I would request the audience to break out and move into the WebEx rooms of your choice. We will take a 2-minute break, and until folks settle down into the rooms of their choice. So on the chat window, please may I request Sunny are able to